He can't be stuck in Portland, Oregon. Gotta get him out of there. But damn it, you've had him long enough.
Damn it, it's time. Damian Lillard going to a destination where he can actually contend for a title.
Less than 24 hours later, Lillard has asked for a trade. He prefers a trade to the Miami Heat.
It is official. Damian Lillard has finally requested a trade from the Portland Trail Blazers. As a Blazers fan, I've had many mixed feelings about this situation. Dame has put his heart and soul into this organization and city, and he's got little to no help from the GM or the owner to build a contending team around him. As of right now, the Portland Trail Blazers stink, and Dame was giving the team one last chance, one last offseason to build a better team around him and get him some gosh darn help. What did the Blazers do? Well, they signed Jeremy Grant to a 5-year, $160 million contract. Dame saw this news and said, hell nah, I'm out of here. Dame had reached his breaking point and was done, but where did things truly start to go wrong between the Portland Trail Blazers and Damian Lillard? 2019, the Blazers go on a crazy playoff run without their big man Jusuf Nurkic. They beat the OKC Thunder in 5 games with a series-ending 37-footer buzzer beater. Then they beat the Denver Nuggets in 7 games. You can see the joy in Dame's face after beating the Nuggets, but this is where things start to go very, very wrong. The Blazers would face off against the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. They would get their behinds handed to them. Even without Kevin Durant, who had gotten injured in the second round, the Blazers got swept. The 2019 Trailblazers offseason was terrible. It was horrible. It was awful. Those are the only 3 words I can use to describe it. They would lose players like Alfred Camino, Mo Harkless, and Seth Curry in free agency. Then they would make a terrible trade for Kent Bazemore. The only somewhat decent move that the Blazers made was trading for Hassan Whiteside. The only reason why the Hassan Whiteside move was somewhat decent was because they needed a starting center for their team. Nurk was going to miss the entire season, and they just needed some guy that could block shots for them. The basketball gods also were not very kind to the Portland Trailblazers. In the middle of December, Rodney Hood would go down with a big-time injury, tearing his Achilles tendon. After the Rodney Hood injury, they would sign Carmelo Anthony. No NBA team wanted Carmelo Anthony, but the Blazers decided to take a chance on him. He was pretty decent for the Blazers, but wasn't going to fix their overall problem, which was defense. With the lack of defense, the Blazers found themselves outside of the playoffs during All-Star break. 1 month after All-Star break, the whole NBA would shut down. A few months later, the NBA would open up in the NBA bubble. In the NBA bubble, the Blazers had 8 games to get back into the playoffs. The NBA also added the play-in tournament, and Dame was dropping 60-point bombs to keep the Blazers season alive. They somehow fought their way into the 8th seed. In the first ever play-in game, the Blazers would face off against the Memphis Grizzlies. Dame, CJ, and Carmelo would end up hitting some big-time clutch shots and would end up taking the W against the Memphis Grizzlies. In the first round, the Blazers would end up losing to the Lakers in 5 games, a very disappointing season to say the least. Next offseason, they would trade for Robert Covington and sign Derrick Jones Jr. and Enes Kanter. I really like what the Blazers did. They brought in some 3-and-D wing defenders that they desperately needed. CJ McCollum ended up getting injured and missed a large chunk of the season and was only able to play 46 games. The Trailblazers ended up making a big time mistake trading for Norman Powell. They would give up Gary Trent Jr., who had blossomed into a nice young player for the Blazers, and Rodney Hood, who hadn't been the same since his injury. This trade really had Blazers fans confused on why we would do it. Don't get me wrong, Norman Powell was a solid player for the Raptors. He averaged 20 points per game over there, but his fit on the Blazers was very awkward and just made no sense. The Blazers were running him at the small forward, and Norman Powell is 6'4" on a good day. He didn't have the size, nor did he have the strength to keep up with the bigger forwards like LeBron James or the Kevin Durants. In the first round of the playoffs, the Blazers would face off against the Denver Nuggets, and this series really taught me a lot. The Norman Powell experiment was an absolute failure. Nurkic had definitely lost a step. He was not the same player he was before the injury and had lost a significant amount of athleticism. Dame was dropping 55-point bombs in the playoffs and hitting insane clutch shots, and were still losing. The Blazers just stood no chance, and they lost to the Denver Nuggets in 6 games. The Blazers would fire their head coach, who sucked, and would trade Derrick Jones Jr. and a first-round pick for Larry Nance Jr. Damian Lillard started off the season very slow. He didn't look like the Dame we knew and loved. Something was wrong. 33 games into the season, Dame would go down with abdominal surgery and would miss the rest of the year. The Blazers would end up firing their GM and hire Joe Cronin, and at the trade deadline, the Blazers went on a fire sale. They would trade CJ McCollum and Larry Nance Jr. to the Pelicans for Josh Hart and a couple of second-round picks. They would also trade Norman Powell and Robert Covington to the Clippers for Keon Johnson and Eric Bledsoe. It felt like we just didn't get any return for any of the players we had just traded for. Josh Hart was the only player that we traded for that ended up getting big-time minutes. The only good thing about this season is that Anthony Simons had exploded into a great young player. He was one of the best shooters in the NBA. He averaged 17 points per game and had a couple of 40 pieces throughout the year. Next offseason, the Blazers front office would actually make some smart moves, which was kind of surprising. They would flip a first round pick that they got from the CJ McCollum trade and get Jeremy Grant from the Pistons. With the 7th overall pick, the Blazers would end up drafting Shaedon Sharpe, a high flyer out of Kentucky straight out of high school. Shaedon Sharpe had tons of potential of being a great NBA player, and had the highest vertical leap in NBA history in the NBA Combine. These two offseason additions kept Dame happy for now. The Blazers would end up missing the playoffs. They just didn't have the defense, and teams around them had gotten better, and they didn't have the best coaching. But luck would be on the Blazers' side. The Blazers ended up jumping up to the 3rd overall pick in the NBA lottery. This made Dame super happy because that meant the Blazers could end up trading the 3rd overall pick for a win-now player. Throughout the entire offseason, Dame had been questioning his future with the Blazers. He kept getting reassurance from the front office and Joe Cronin that they were trying to build a win-now team, a contending team around Dame. The draft rolls around and the Blazers end up keeping the 3rd overall pick and drafted Scoot Henderson. And don't get me wrong, Scoot Henderson is a dog, but he's not a win-now player like Dame wants. Dame wasn't too thrilled about drafting Scoot, and this is where the drama started to heat up. Dame went out and said, "I don't want to play for a rebuilding team." Dame and the Blazers would have a meeting. The Blazers front office gave the same old crap to Dame and lied to his face once again. They said they were committed to building a contending team around Dame. Dame was giving the Blazers one last chance to do something in free agency. Day 1 of free agency, we all know what happened. They gave Jeremy Grant the bag, and Dame said hell nah, and he requested a trade. What's next for Damian Lillard? Well, I'm 90% sure that Dame is going to end up on the Miami Heat next season. The Dame trade to the Miami Heat would be a 4-team trade. The Blazers would receive Ben Simmons, Doug McDermott, Nicholas Claxton, Nikola Jovic, 3 first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps from the Miami Heat. The Nets would get Tyler Hero, Yusuf Nurkic, and Caleb Martin. As for the Spurs, they would be receiving cheeky boy Kyle Lowry and a 2nd-round pick. I really think this is a good trade for every side of the puzzle. Dame is finally free, and I can't wait to see what Dame does on a new team.